Happy Sunday evening, everybody, and welcome to your favorite Mad Men podcast, Made Man, where today I just finished watching episode 6 of season 7 of Mad Men, The Strategy. What is the strategy in this episode? I think we all know what it is. But before we get any further into today's episode, let's take a moment to hear from today's sponsor. Oh, what a wonderful sponsor. You know, the other night, my wife and I, we had a gift card to a place called the Fuddruckers, which is a hamburger joint. And I went, picked it up, brought it back. Hamburger, some milkshakes, little sody pop, and it was very good, a nice hamburger. And the why is that tie-in? I really don't know, except for the fact that today's episode of Mad Men had a lot to do with hamburgers and the people who eat them. Our episode opens up outside a Burger Chef. The Sterling Cooper and partners are really trying to get this Burger Chef deal. So they're doing a few different things, key strategies, and that is going to burger chefs and interviewing people, feeding them, and then getting their ideas. It seemed like they were meeting a woman who was trying to leave before answering their questions. And Peggy's like, "Oh, before you go, we gave you a nice hot dinner that we paid for, could you please, answer a few questions?" She's like, I need to go. My husband's waiting for me. If I don't get home in time, he's already mad enough that I don't cook. That's like, it's so old-fashioned. But basically, they're doing that market research, trying to find the perfect reason why someone would go to Burger Chef, why someone should go to Burger Chef, and really trying to come up with the perfect ad. Meanwhile, coming into town is Mr. Peter Campbell. He's with, and I don't remember her name, the realtor, who is his girlfriend, who is very excited to be coming to town with him. He wants to meet young Tammy, but Pete, who, every time he talks, he sounds like he is a car salesman. Like, he just has this phony kind of big, giant smile, is glad-handing. Just, even when he's talking to his girlfriend, he's just very much like this. It's only when he doesn't get his way that you can see, the real loser in him come out, the real jerk. But he didn't, in the airplane, he got exactly what he wanted, as it seems like he's joining the Mile High Club, which, it seems good for him. Great. Why don't we just do the Pete storyline now? Let's just stick with Pete. So he comes into the office, and he's with his girlfriend, who just kind of walks in on Don's office. And it's great. His secretary goes, "You're not supposed to be in here." And then he's like, "Oh, it's okay." And then she says to him, "Do you want me to call you or say I need you in 5 minutes?" And winks, where even her saying that defeats the purpose. So I thought that was pretty funny. So Pete's there for business, and he's there, I think, because of Burger Chef. I guess I can't do the whole Pete storyline. Let's do the main parts. He wanted his girlfriend to be seen. He's like, "Walk me to the conference room." Then later on, he goes to visit his daughter, Tammy, and he's going to see Trudy, I guess, as well, except he goes to the house, and he's in, the worst, sports jacket. It just reminds me of something that I think my grandfather would have worn when he was a younger man. Excuse me. But he goes to the house, and the maid comes out, and there's no Trudy, and Tammy doesn't even recognize her dad. He's like, "It's me, Daddy. I brought you a Barbie," even though his girlfriend is the one who bought the Barbie. The girlfriend wanted to meet Tammy really bad. Pete's like, next time. I haven't seen her in a while. So he goes, he's like, "Where's Trudy?" "Oh, she's out getting groceries." "Oh, okay. Well, can you walk her to the car?" So I guess that she's going to have time with her dad. who she doesn't even know, she doesn't even recognize, and she's probably freaked out by a sports jacket. They come back later, and the maid's there, and he goes, where's Trudy? Oh, she's not home yet. Oh, she's not here. She went out. He goes, her car's in the driveway. Well, she came home, and then she went out. He's like, oh, okay. Why don't you give her a bath, and then I'll tuck her in. She's like, yes, Mr. Campbell. I'm assuming Pete's still paying for her, so he just kind of sticks around, and I think he just kind of gets drunk because he's annoyed because Trudy's out enjoying herself. Now, Pete's there with his girlfriend, quote-unquote still married, but he's in town with his girlfriend, and he is upset that Trudy is out. Trudy comes home. She's like, oh, what are you doing here? He's like, who are you out with? You know, that you shouldn't be that way. You're a mother, and it's very unbecoming, or whatever. He's like, you're a married woman, and she's like, we're still married, and she's like, we're getting a divorce. You're not a part of this family anymore, Peter. He's like, what are you keeping from me? Like you kept your father's heart attack from me. But she said, you're not a part of this family anymore. I loved it. Trudy, you're too good for Pete. Everyone's too good for Pete. Screw him. Get him out of there. Goodbye, Pete. Don't care anymore. He ate some of her a dessert, I think, and then he stuck his beer in the dessert, and he's like, I'm leaving, and he walks out. And for a real scary moment, I thought he might hit her. Like, I was nervous because this is the 60s, and maybe guys get away with it more than I don't know. And I was like, oh my God, is he actually going to do it and think it's okay? And I get nervous. So thank God he's not that much of a monster. He's an asshole, but he's not a monster. So later we see Pete go back to his girlfriend's, to the hotel room where the girlfriend's at, and he already ate. And she's upset because they wanted to get dinner. And she's basically upset with him because this is her vacation. And he's done all these different things. All he's done is work. He spent time with his daughter. And he didn't really spend any time with her. Again, he's there for work. And he's there to see his kid. So, you think she'd understand. She didn't seem to understand. She went back to California without him. She was on the same plane as Megan. What? Megan's in town? That's right. Why don't we rewind back a little more and talk about... maybe I'll go in order of what I see now, because there's a lot that happened in this episode. Oh my goodness. We got to see little baby Kevin. Joan, is leaving for the day, but I think she knows that Mr. Bob Benson is going to be in town. Why is Bob Benson in town? He's in town. I guess he's in town for Chevy, but there's just so much happening in this episode. Should I just do the Chevy stuff now? I mean, this is crazy. I can't keep track. I'll try to, I'm going to pull up Netflix now and try to go in order of where I am, just so I don't lose things. So, okay, so Pete's there and he's all excited to see Dawn, and Pete meets the girlfriend. And he sees Dawn. He's like, Dawn, it's great to see you. It's just very phony and fake. And just like very, he's like the king of mansplaining. I think that's what he is. That's a great way of saying it. What has turned into the term mansplaining is someone like Pete, who is always talking and always explaining and always trying to be the smartest person in the room. Well, he gets brought in for Burger Chef. So Peggy's in the room with Stan and Lou and what's his name? What is his name? Harry Crane. Oh, there's more about Harry later. And they're kind of going over some stuff about Burger Chef, and Harry's like, well, is that the billboard? That's boring. And Stan's like, that's for the food. That's for the tray. But anyway, Pete comes in, and even like, what's his name? Stan is happy to see Pete. He's like, hey man, how's it going? How you doing? And Pete goes in to see them because he's part of this meeting, and Dawn comes in, and Peggy's like, oh, did you want the whole team here? What did you need anything? Lou said to Dawn. Pete's like, no, I wanted Dawn in here. And Peggy, you could just see right there, right at that moment, Peggy was shook. Her confidence was shook, and her like what is happening here? Don is a partner in title only. He's kind of lost his power. He brought it on himself. And even though, but even with that, just the idea of him being there is still like this overarching kind of like cloud to the other people that are threatened by him. Pete's not threatened by him. Pete values him and still still respects what he can do. Lou is threatened by him because Lou has his old job. Peggy is threatened by him because she's leading this burger chef thing. So she goes in and they go over the pitch. It's actually a really nice idea. It's about the mom and, Peggy. I love when Peggy gives her pitches. She seems so earnest the way she's delivering this commercial to us. We can picture it in our head. It's about a family and a mother trying to figure out everything and going to get Burger Chef. She goes into the Burger Chef. A man comes out with a bag of food, kisses them, and the kids are confused. I don't know why they'd be confused. It's their dad. And the whole thing is there's the dad and the whole family getting, bringing families together or something like that. I don't know. So, but the whole thing is from the wife's point of view. Peggy really likes it. Lou really likes it. He's like, this is really coming together. This is really good. And Pete's like, that's great. That's great. What do you think, Don? And Harry's there too because this is a TV commercial. But he goes, what do you think, Don? And that's where I'm just like, you could see Lou and Peggy do not care, do not want to know what Don thinks. They think they have a winner here. That's good enough. But good enough isn't always good enough. And Don was just like, I think it's great. I think it's a great idea. We're in a great spot. And Peggy was actually pleasantly surprised to be backed up by Don like that. Now we cut over to a steam room where some fella comes up to talk to Roger. And this one I didn't quite understand. It seemed like Roger knew that they were... Roger, he brought up about them. He knows they're going after Philip Morris. And how are you going to do that with Don Draper? And then Roger tried to make it almost like a homophobic thing where he thinks the guy's coming on to him. But the guy mentioned something about a little car and something else. And I didn't quite get it there. The guy was alluding to something with business. But at the end of the episode, it makes sense. And we'll get there. So Roger, I think, was just like being a jerk, kind of saying the guy is gay, trying to hit on him. So back in the office, because this is all happening during workday, Roger's off getting a steam. Back in the office, Pete is meeting with Peggy, and they bring in. Pete is meeting with Lou. They bring in Peggy, and so this is obviously Burger Chef is Pete's thing. I forget how this happened. So wasn't Pete? Pete was at a meeting, and that's when he saw the guy and talked. That's right. This is Pete's client, right? Pete was at dinner. Some guy was staring at him. Turns out it's a guy he knew, and it's actually Eugene from Walking Dead, if I remember correctly. And he is the guy who talked about Burger Chef. Am I correct? I think so. Excuse me. So they bring Peggy in, and I think they're doing a bang-up job. But this is where it starts to go downhill for Peggy. And Pete's like, I think Don should give the presentation. I think that the client is expecting Don. Excuse me, I'm yawning because it's so late. The client would be expecting someone like Don, a man, and I think he'd give a good presentation because he's a man. And then you can come in like the mother at the end and swoop in, and you can see Peggy. He goes, but it's completely up to you. This is your client. This is your thing. It's completely up to you. She's like, well, I wish you didn't put me in this position. Lou actually was on his side. Was on her side. I think also because it's against Don. But Lou was like, yeah, I think she's doing fine. And he goes, yeah, she's doing fine. But really think that Dawn should be the one to present it, and but it's your call, it's your thing. And then you hear, yes, it's your call, and it's Ted Chaw on the other line. She didn't even know Ted was there. They didn't even tell her Ted was there. And you can see that shook her up a little bit because she hasn't spoken to Ted since he left. But all these people are basically saying, look, this is your call, but we think you should have Dawn do your presentation. And that wasn't actually the worst thing said. The worst thing Pete said, because they talked about how good she is, how talented she is. Pete said to her, "You're as good as any woman in this business." And it's like, I thought about it. I was like, well, that's a nice thing to say, but wait, what do you mean? She's as good as any woman. She's not as good as any man. How about she's as good as anybody? But that's Pete. I don't think Pete even realizes how much of an ass he can be, or how condescending he sounds. Or he probably meant that as a wonderful compliment. You're a woman working in business. What a wonderful thing that is. You're as good as any other woman, but you're no man. Oh, Pete, you jerk. Oh, Peter, I hate you so much. So, she ends up going, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, and she ends up going into Dawn's office, and she's like, listen, I want to tell you something. I think you should give the presentation. Even Dawn was like, what? Whose idea was this? And she's like, what? That I loved. Like, he even knew that this wouldn't have been her idea. He's like, what are you talking about? And he is, he reluctantly, he's like, you have a good idea. He goes, actually, another thought I had is like, what if we did it from the kid's point of view? And that shook her too. She's like, what? No, we have the idea. That's the idea. He goes, okay. And she leaves the room, and you could see Dawn was like, yes, number one, he's in on this. He gets to present, which gets to show how important he is. But the whole thing about the kid's idea, like, he got to throw another 2 cents in it. That, I don't think he was cheering more about that. I think he was more happy that he's needed more. But Peggy, not only was she shook that that's my word of the day, shook. Not only was she upset about the fact that Dawn is going to be given the presentation, but the fact that Dawn was thinking of a different strategy. The strategy, see the title of the episode. The strategy she was going with is fine. But the moment Dawn came up with that strategy, or just even mentioned another strategy, Peggy started second-guessing herself completely. But before we keep going, let's jump back. Like in the previous scene, we see a couple guys coming up from Chevy, from Detroit, with Mr. Bob Benson. Bob's back from Detroit, and he's in town, and they're meeting, they're in town for business. And Joan meets one of them, and the guy's like, oh, dude, she's like, you could see the guy was very taken aback by Joan, a little flirty with him. And Bob was like, hey, do you want to do anything later? Unless you're off running around with married men, like joking about that guy. But they also ran into Ken, who they hadn't seen in a while. And he's like, how's that kid of yours? Ken's like, oh, you really have to keep an eye on him. And it was so subtle. He said that, and they both just kind of looked down. It wasn't like, it was so well done, because a lot of shows you'd be like, keep an eye, like they do some kind of awkward thing where you have to keep an eye on because he's got an eye patch, and like, but they just did it so well where you could see both guys. I actually rewound it to watch it again. Both guys just kind of like looked like, what do I say about that? Luckily, that's when Joan came in. But I thought it was it was a very funny, subtly acted moment. So then, as I said, Peggy goes into Don's office. Peggy comes out of Don's office, and she's like, she's upset. And then all of a sudden she said, hey, what are you doing here? And it's Megan. Megan's in town. The secretary's like, oh, I'm sorry, can I help you? Oh, this is Megan. This is Don's wife. She's like, oh, I didn't even know he was married. And you can see the woman was like, oh, hi, how you doing? Okay. And you forget that Megan worked in the office, and she was really good at her job. So she saw Peggy for a bit, and she's like, you a surprise? Oh, no, he's expecting me. And then Stan comes in. He's like, oh, how you doing? Good to see you. And then Don comes in. He's like, oh, he didn't expect her, I guess, in the office. He's like, oh, so they go off. He's like, do you mind if I go off and have lunch or whatever? Like, yeah, they go. And You could see Peggy was still annoyed by Dawn. Stan was like caught in the middle because he was like she's starting to second guess the work, and Stan thinks the work is good. There's nothing to worry about, but you could see Peggy just hasn't been able to shake this as far as what's going on with just the whole idea of the fact that Dawn has to give the presentation, and the fact that Dawn came up with an idea that maybe is better than Peggy's idea, and now gets her thinking about her idea constantly. So there was a brief moment where they talked about Philip Morris. There really wasn't much in this episode about it, but Jim Cutler, Harry Hamlin, now I remember his name, Jim Cutler came up and said he played a round of golf with a guy from Philip Morris, talked to Roger a little bit about it, and he's like, your name came up, and you know, I'd like you to, if we could have your help with that. And he's like, oh, your secret bid to win the war? And you could see Jim was like, stop worrying about Dawn and start worrying about the company. Give him a little pat on the arm and just kind of walked off. Where I think I don't quite get it exactly, because is it Dawn? They're trying to win Philip Morris just without Dawn? Or is Roger trying to keep Dawn? I don't know exactly what it is. But that was just something to mention. Now, then all of a sudden we get the next shot is a phone ringing in the middle of the night. And for a moment I thought it was Don Draper. I was like, what's going on here? What's going on? Nope, it's Bob. Bob Benson. Bob Benson. I don't know why I even saying that. He got called. Why? Because one of the guys that came into from Detroit with him has been arrested. Has been picked up and is in the joint. And Bob he got called, and Bob's there to bail him out. And what happened? Well, you can see the guard was a real dick. And he's like, all right, ladies, here you go. Here's your boyfriend here got picked up trying to fillet an undercover officer. So then you realize, oh, this guy who Bob mentioned earlier is married is either secretly gay or bisexual or something. And he's out there trying to have, oral sex with a police officer. And he calls Bob, and they get in the car, and he's like, look, I know I can trust you with this, and you're not going to say anything. And Bob was upset, and he's like, why did you even do this? And you could see Bob, because remember, Bob came on to Pete, but I think Bob really tries to put those feelings aside for the most part and doesn't want to be gay, and we'll see more of that later. The guy with him is like, I know I can trust you. He goes, to be discreet or something, and Bob thinks, then he says something, and Bob thinks he's going to be fired. He's like, you're not going to get fired. He goes, and this is how they find out that we're taking the XP or X1 or whatever in-house. So the stuff that they've been doing with Sterling Cooper is being taken away from them. Now this is General Motors, so they have Chevy, but right, I'm correct, right? Chevy, and they have other things, because they're like, don't worry, something else is coming, and we want you to work on Buick. So they want Bob to be hired by Buick, not for the company. I think for Bob himself. So he's basically saying you're gonna find out soon enough. Sterling Cooper's losing the client, and there'll be other stuff, but the test went well. It was a test thing, but Buick likes you, and they want to bring you in. And he's like, how can you live in this city? It's so much temptation. But he said, like, he's like, you need to go to the hospital. He goes, I don't want the cops to call. He goes, thank God my wife understands. So what I'm guessing is, he's married, but he likes men, and his wife understands. That's what my guess was from that. And maybe that got Bob thinking. I never thought of that. So maybe this guy is in a kind of a quote-unquote arrangement, because why don't we stick with Bob's thing? I mean, really, what else are we gonna do? So later on, Bob, remember Kevin loves Bob, and Joan loves Bob, and Joan's mother loves Bob, because Bob is just a swell guy, and he's just very good to them. And he goes over, and he gets Kevin a gift, and he goes off and spends the day with them, and he's like, I'm sorry I didn't get you anything. But then later on, he's like, listen, I said I didn't get you anything, but that's not exactly true. Takes out an engagement ring and proposes to Joan. Now, what pissed me off is the Netflix description. The first line says, Bob proposes to Joan when he gets a job offer. Like, wait, what? So I actually didn't read it before I started the episode, but I'm like, wait, but if I did, it would have been, wait, Bob's in this episode and he proposes to Joan and he gets a job offer? What the hell's going on? Like, that's in the Netflix description. That's like a major, like, spoiler alert. My God. He proposes to her, and then he is kind of a dick to her, where he's like, he said, look, he goes, I'm going to be in Detroit. You can stay here. You don't even have to worry about it. Kevin can have a father. You can have a husband, or you can come to Detroit. He'll love it there. And he basically was like, look, this is the best you're going to get. You're almost 40, and you don't have anybody. And I don't even think he realized how what's his name? What's the word? How insulting he came. What's his name? What's the word? I don't think he realized how insulting he came off. He's like, I wasn't sure Joan knows, and he didn't keep it a secret. She's like, you shouldn't be with a woman. And he's like, well, this, he didn't want to take that for an answer. He was like, this would be good for you. You can actually have someone. And he goes, you're almost 40, living in a 2-bedroom apartment with your son. It's not going to get any better than this. He's like, you're not going to get a better offer than this. I was like, whoa, you're not going to get a better offer than this. Are you out of your mind? That's ridiculous. And she was like, I don't, he goes, what more could you want? And she's like, love. I want to get married for love, not for convenience. Not an arrangement. And she kind of booted him after that. But that was, I think, I don't know I think that's what that other guy had. He has a marriage of convenience. He has a marriage that he has so that, he can go do his own thing and have his wife. And that's really it for the Bob Benson stuff. I mean, it comes into the end, but why don't we go to Dawn and Megan? Not a ton of stuff here, but Megan's in town. I mean, we have to talk about it because it happened. Megan's in town visiting. She's there to get some stuff and get some coffee maker stuff too. Like, I think she wanted a coffee maker bring back, and Don said he'll bring some of the stuff back when he goes and visits. And Megan's like, I'd also like to have a place where we're not just visiting each other, where we just go. There's no New York, there's no LA. We just have that. And so Don said he liked that too. I'm assuming they spent a nice night together. They seemed like they were in a pretty good place. They had breakfast out on the patio, and Don just wanted to take her shopping all day. So it seems like they're in a good place. And really, if I'm not crazy, that's the end of Megan. At the end of this episode, we see Pete's girlfriend without Pete, and then they go back a little, and there's Megan. She's on the same plane. Then we go back a little more, and the drapes close, and that was in front of, like, between first class and I'm guessing first class and coach. They're on the plane, and I don't know. It was a cool shot. I just didn't know the significance of it, but it's just funny that they're on the same plane together. And that's really it for the Megan stuff. Not a great deal of stuff happened. It was just they just had a nice moment where they were really happy and happy to see each other. So, to me, the big storyline is the Burger Chef one and Peggy. Peggy just being second guessed. Second guessed about not second guessed about the strategy at first, but second guessed about presenting the strategy. Then Don brings up the second guessing of the strategy itself, and Peggy is just pissed, and really, she calls him at home. She's like, what is? She's up in the middle of the night. She wakes up thinking about it. She goes to work in the office on a Saturday. Wants Stan to come in. Doesn't bring him in once she realizes there's nothing to do. Stan's like, the work is fine. The work is good. The work, And she's like, don't you think it could be better? And Stan said, he goes, there's always a better idea. But this is a solid idea. It wasn't good enough for her. She ends up calling Don at home and yelling at him about the idea. And she kind of stays at work and keeps working on it. And Don ends up going to work. He goes into the office. And I love Peggy and Don's relationship. Like, it's not perfect. But Don just treats her like an equal, treats her with respect. She's pissed. I also like that they're using Lou's office, using Lou's bar. She's pissed that he even has a second idea. She's pissed that now she knows that her idea is shit and not good enough, and she even feels it. So they just keep working on ideas, and she's like, I want to know how you think. And Don, says, if I don't like my idea, I start from scratch, and I see where I end up. If I end up in the same place, and what's your strategy with creative? He goes, usually I like to burn the bridges and piss off the people around me, and then I take a nap. All these, they had some nice moments together, trying to work on things in the office. And they kept working on it. They kept coming up with ideas of, first they were like, okay, now the dad's in the car, and the kids are in the back seat, and maybe they're in a convertible, and it was just like trying to paint the painting of the perfect family. And Peggy's like, does that even exist anymore? People still do that. As far as eating around the table. And she kind of came up with a new strategy that this place, it's not just the food, bringing the food home. I think the strategy she started to come up with was the place itself is a place to go. Your family is every table there is the family dinner table. You can bring your family there and have a nice dinner. That, I think, is started to be her new strategy. At that moment, My Way from Sinatra plays on, and Don's like, did you hear that? And go, they're playing that all the time. And then I'm realizing it's probably a new song. So, of course, they're playing it all the time. I just thought of that now. And he goes, yeah, but you think this can't be a coincidence. Then he puts his hand out, and she looks at it, and no. And he just keeps it there. And she's like, no, I'm not going to. And he keeps it there. So finally they get up and they just dance. And you could see there was nothing sexual about it to me. It was just Don, almost like Don being proud of his oldest daughter. That he saw that a revelation went off in her head, an idea. And he's like, she goes, that's it. And he goes, there you go, that's it. And they dance a little, and she rests his head on her shoulder. He gives a little kiss on the head, but it was just very respectful, very classy, and I don't know. I liked it. So the before our episode ends, they all the partners are in the office, and this is where we're going to see another partner get added in, because Jim comes in and Jim finds out that they're going to be losing Chevy. I think Joan went and told them. Oh, I'm sorry. When Bob brought up the whole thing about the Buick and losing Chevy, Joan was like, all of a sudden, she could never mind the fact that Bob was insulting her. She was like, I can't deal with this. This is business. This is her partner. This is her firm. She couldn't focus on the stupid thing Bob wanted to say. But she went and told everybody, and they were having a meeting about it, and Jim is like, I want to get out ahead of this. I want to put ads and articles in the Wall Street Journal and this and that with a picture of the IBM and a picture of Harry Crane, who's our... we have the IBM with our proprietary software and also a photo of Harry Crane, our newest partner. And Joan did not like it at all. Roger did not like it at all. Everyone else seemed fine with it. Pete's like, whatever it takes. So I think they're trying to say is, well, word gets out that they lost Chevy. Jim's like, look, we're a thriving firm. We have a computer and technology, and we have our TV man, and that's kind of they're pushing our new partner. So how can our business be going bad if we're adding a new partner? That's fantastic. That has to be it, right? You can see that. So Joan went in to barge in, and she's pissed about it because they didn't really vote. She goes into Rogers and Roger's office, and Roger's like, what? And she goes, Harry Crane. He goes, whoa, what are we going to do? He goes, how did you even find out about this? Through Bob Benson. And he's going to be getting a job from Buick. And that's when it clicked that what Rogers was saying is like that guy in the steam room was talking about this, meaning they think that Buick's going to be coming for them and trying to make a play for them or something like that. So Roger went from frowning to smiling all within 2 seconds after finding out that Bob was getting a job at Buick. So it's all tied in. I don't exactly figure it out somehow, but it seems like they might be getting Buick instead of Chevy. I don't know. I don't know how it works, but oh my goodness, I'm so tired. Our episode ends the same place it opened, in the Burger Chef. Don and Peggy are there, and Pete's there as well, and they're there to kind of show Pete this is where the commercial should be shot. And Pete's like, what? He goes, this isn't the home. This doesn't scream mom. And Peggy goes, it's family. He goes, this is the every table. That's when she was like, or maybe I forget where she said it, but every table here is the family dinner table. And Pete was like, but he goes, but family's so vague. You know, families are annoying. It's moms. Moms is what they want. Tell them, Don. Don said, this is what she wants to do. This is the right idea. Don stuck up for her. And that was it. That was awesome. And that was the end of the episode. That was the strategy. Peggy's strategy is the way to go. And Don stood by Peggy's strategy the entire way. The only time he kind of second-guessed a little bit of it, but all that did was make Peggy work harder at it. Because it made Peggy realize that I'm not exactly happy with this. This was good enough, but good enough isn't always good enough. You know, Cyndi Lauper said good enough. For you, it's good enough. It's good enough for me. Yeah. That means nothing. It has nothing to do with what I just said, but I had to say it because it's from the Goonies. So, geez, a lot happened in this episode. Like, a lot. Like major things. When I say major things, I'm not talking the Burger Chef because we don't know what that is yet. But as far as that, even though it was like a small thread throughout the show, the fact that they're losing Chevy and maybe getting Buick is humongous for the business. I think they're going to get Burger Chef. Stan has a girlfriend that he calls Baby. He doesn't. He didn't have to go into work with Peggy on a Saturday, which was nice. We know about Peggy and Dawn. They just kind of pushed each other. Peggy pushed herself and was much happier with her idea, even though it seems like Dawn might be presenting it because of Pete, creepy Pete, saying that, you know, Peggy is really good, one of the best women in this business. She's as good as any woman. And, but at least they're going to stick with her idea, even if Dawn is pushing it. Megan was in town to visit, and that kind of all went well, and she'd like to spend more time with her husband away from all of this. Roger was getting a Spitz? I don't know if I'm saying that right, but he got something from a guy that seemed like talking about their clients, and now whatever it is, he's excited because they think that that Buick is going to be making a play for them. At the same time, Jim wants Roger on his side as far as Philip Morris is concerned. I don't know how Philip Morris is going to work with Don Draper. That'll be interesting. But Don is still working where he can. Pete's still a jerk with his family. And Lou's wife has a nice sense of humor when giving him a bar, I think, or picking out a bar. Golly, I think I covered everything in this episode. There was no Francis family, no Sally, Bobby, Henry, or Betty. Now, this is what I want to talk about. So I think that's the end of this episode. But before I finish, I wanted to talk to you about Betty Draper Francis. Longtime listeners of the show will know that I am not a fan of Betty. And I'm at work the other day, and I mentioned to someone in my office, I said, I got 9 episodes left of Mad Men. And they were like, oh, because they know that I've been watching it. They know I've been podcasting about it. I joked early on where I wanted to just come into work wearing a suit, smoking cigarettes and drinking all day. And they always joked about it. And I brought up Betty, and there are women in the office. So I'm like the only guy in my department. And they're like, oh, I love Betty. I love Betty. I love Betty. I'm like, what? So then I'm like, wait a minute. Am I the crazy one? Not like, am I wrong here to not like Betty? Am I being like a Don Draper? But then one of them said, but you do like Don Draper? I go, no. You don't understand. I know Don Draper is not a good person. I find myself rooting for him. I just Betty annoys me the way she is with Sally. And I love Sally. I was like, no, I'm not a jerk. Sally's a great character. I was like, I didn't want to be like the guy who is like, I'm a guy and I like Dawn, and Betty, bleh, I don't like her. That's not the way it is at all. But I was like, I really didn't want them to think that was the way. But I just thought it was pretty funny. And then I thought, wow, I didn't realize that, like,
I don't know how to help with that.
I wasn't talking to you, Google. But I didn't realize that that some people saw Betty and really, really liked the character. I was just like, whoa. I thought she was made to be unlikable. And then I'm like, I got to rewatch this someday and look at it as someone who really likes her. Look, I mean, she got a raw deal, let's be honest, with Dawn. That was awful. Dawn treated her like garbage. I will never, say that Don Draper's a good man, but it doesn't change the fact that you do root for him. It's crazy. I know it's crazy, but there's a lot of shows where you root for the guy who is not a good person. But they're the main person. They're the person you're watching this whole thing through, so you can't help but view. And then I did a nice impression of Don in the end of every episode, or many episodes, where he sits there and just kind of looks off, contemplating and angry or upset. But that's all. I just want to throw it out there that my thoughts on Betty have been second guessed, or have made me second guess, much like Peggy was second guessing her strategy after Dawn threw out a word there, or threw out an idea. I just thought that was a fun little thing to mention. And with that, my friends, my good friends, my best friends, I say I think I'm done. Now, Sunday evening, as you know, there are reasons things happen, and that's why I didn't get the episode out earlier. But this week I'm on vacation all week. And going up to my in-laws' house up in New Hampshire. They're in Florida, so now the house is empty. Now they say I was told there's no cable or Wi-Fi, but then my wife's sister just came back, and they were like, "Oh, the Wi-Fi is working, so maybe there will be Wi-Fi." Either way, I'm going to find a way to be watching my episode of Mad Men next week. And coming back to you with another podcast next week. But until then, there's a couple things I want to tell you. On Twitter, you can find me at Geek Mentality, or at the podcast at Made Man Pod. The website is fansnotexperts.com/mademan, and the Facebook page is just Fans Not Experts. And I believe we're all set here. So there's just one thing I need to say to you. But I'm not going to say it in this voice. I want to thank you I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for subscribing. And I want to thank you for coming along with me on this journey as I start vacation and continue my trek to strive to become a made man.
Fans not experts.